room. So welcome and thank you very much to my three panellists for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to ask the panellists to quickly introduce themselves and give us a quick précis on their experience and skills in the civil construction sector. Or otherwise, and then we're going to get into a deep dive into some questions around the civil construction training sector and what we are looking for in the future. So Alan, if I could ask you to please introduce yourself.
Yeah, is this working?
Yes.
Yep, good. So Alan Pollard, CEO at Civil Contractors New Zealand. I'm a chartered accountant, apologise for that. I've been in my role for 2 years now. I don't actually have a construction background at all. My previous experience was leading the apple industry, apple and pear industry in New Zealand for about 10 years.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Nicola Richardson, Director of Leadership at Waihanga. I also have no construction experience, but that's okay because I have lots of leadership development and learning experience. I think most of you know what Waihanga does. It's around the long-term advice to government around our infrastructure. My role is around building the capability of our leaders of our biggest projects. So it's our major projects. It's the people building our schools, our hospitals, our roads. How can we ensure that they have the skills they need to lead the people to ensure that we have more productive, more efficient projects and that we do things better. So I have, I'm outside a little bit of some of this conversation, but I'll lean in around culture and diversity and learning and doing great things better.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, ko Graham Burke, Takawingwa. I have had a bit of experience in construction. I've been in the sector about 40 years. Not civil construction, but a lot of that in heavy construction in the scaffold industry. So I've had a few mental and physical scars to prove my background in a similar kind of cycle to what we're in at the moment. Back about 30 years ago, I went personally bankrupt as a sole trader, which was a experience I would certainly not recommend, but certainly a bloody learning one. And I've also managed to build a reasonably successful business and sell it on, and it's still trading in Wellington today, which I'm very proud of. Interestingly, the thing I was really crap at as a business owner was not looking after my people, but leading my people. I wasn't a natural people person. I was a project guy, right? But since and I used to get my thrills out of doing a project really well. But the thing that I'm really proud of now is the fact that I still get just random texts from hard case dudes around the country saying, "Hey bro, how's it going? Thanks for back in the day." They don't have to thank me. I mean, I need to thank them, but it's actually the people that are the most important part. And hey, I wish I'd learnt 20 years earlier what I kind of learned in the latter stages of my career. Sorry if that was off point.
No, it's great. Thanks, Graham. So late last year, ConCOVE released a paper. There is a copy of the summary on your tables entitled Civil Construction, a Requirement for a Robust and Reliable Training Pipeline. You would think that that's pretty clear that we need this to meet some of our large infrastructure and growing regional needs as well. There were 4 recommendations from the report. Number 1 was significant and ongoing engagement with industry. There will be people in the room that argue that this happens already. I have a different opinion. Substantial and sustained funding at scale to develop multiple training options. Number 3 was a large campus for training at scale to develop multiple training options, and an integrated training pathway suggesting that such a large campus might sit inside that integrated training pathway. What I want to put to the panel first of all is I'm just going to pick which one to start with. So I'm going to pick for the panel, and we'll start with Nicola, I think, on this one, but how can we better integrate workforce skill development into infrastructure planning processes? What steps can be taken to make vocational education and training a priority in these plans and then in the implementation of these plans. I touched on this morning. It's very dear to my heart. Over to you, panel. Nicola.
Thanks for that opportunity. So I suppose I first need to be clear that I am speaking from my own personal perspectives because Te Waihanga obviously doesn't have official guidance or advice on many of these things. I think if I look to where, across projects that I'm aware of, where it has been integrated, I think CRL is probably an example that many of us know has integrated the learning pathways. There are apprenticeships, there are partnerships, there are different ways in order to meet the skills that we need, that we will build it. I think if I look from the public sector perspective, how can we do more of that? How, when we build our projects, when we design them, when we procure them, can we ensure that we are building the capability we need? So it is less ad hoc. I think there is a lot of ad hoc things happen. People are trying their best, but we have to be really clear that actually we don't have all the skills we need for all of the projects, and our pipeline is clear on that. But if we make it a requirement as we design and as we procure, and then we manage it, I think we'll probably have more of a chance. So it's around government expectations when government is the client, because obviously that's what the government can control.
Great, thank you. Alan.
Yeah, well, not only am I not a civil industry expert, I'm not a training and education expert either. My colleague Rebecca does that for us. So I look at it from a kind of a commercial and strategic viewpoint. And I look at it this way. If you look right now, our industry is in a hole. We have limited work on the horizon, and a number of our businesses are restructuring and downsizing. What happens when businesses are struggling is their discretionary spend tends to fall away. What's classified as discretionary spend? Well, training actually falls into that category for a lot of business as well. So why is there no incentive and motivation to keep training? Well, then I think if you look at the tender process and procurement process, a lot of them have a number of financial attributes and a large number of non-financial attributes, and all our guys put their tenders in, and then the lowest cost tender wins. So there's no value placed by the client on training and education. So my view is until the client values education as a fundamental part of the project supply chain, there's no motivation and incentive on businesses to actually deliver on that.
Kia ora.
If
That was level 3, by the way.
One of the things that I have heard, and I'm not sure if it's always the case, but sometimes when government is a client, things are put into the contract that the main contractor agrees to, but then as it's subcontracted and subcontracted, it's no longer adhered to. And I believe that sometimes apprenticeships and education is one of those things. So absolutely, how do we address that?
Yep. Graham.
Yeah, look, I agree with that. And just like Nicola, these are my views, not the government's. But look, the root cause of all this is the boom-bust cycles that we suffer in the industry, and I've seen a few. I think we've got to be fair. We're never going to get a dead flat, business, smooth business, and I don't think that would be good. But what we want is kind of gentle curves, not these steep ups and downs. Government is 20% roughly of the construction spend right across the sector, is the only client in the country that's actually got the ability to affect that. And, what we see over and over again, I mentioned before what happened in the late 80s, early 90s. We saw the private side of the market crash and government follow it because obviously their revenue's crashing as well. Not everywhere in the world does that. Other places like Singapore and even Australia to some extent has a long, well-planned infrastructure pipeline. Now, a good example is Three Waters, right? So we've been hearing for probably, at least half a decade that we need to have this significant spend on Three Waters. So people have been gearing up on plant. We've been told we need to be training. Now, the good companies have been doing that. And what have we done? We've just had a reversal on government policy, and it's just stopped. Now, I'm not being political here, but this is just history repeating itself. So we've got this influx of people coming into the sector to meet demand, but we've chopped the bloody demand off before they actually become productive. And what are they going to do? companies can't afford to keep them on indefinitely, and people will see benefits in moving elsewhere, either into another sector or offshore. And so we're going to exacerbate the skill shortages we had before. And when we see the policy people decide, well, now's the time to put the foot on the accelerator again, take it off the brake, put on the accelerator, we don't have the skills. And we start chasing ourselves, and so we start backfilling with unskilled or people with not the appropriate skills. So it's an ongoing thing. I mean, so government is the only institution within the country that can do that. The really good businesses that plan forward and have invested in their balance sheet may not be the most profitable. It's quite hard to do that when you've got public shareholding especially, but they're the ones that will accelerate out of the bust into the boom. And I know there's at least one or two companies represented in this room that will be doing that because they see the big picture and they invest in their people as well as their balance sheet. The other thing that I think government could do, we've got this thing called broader outcomes as part of the government procurement rules. It's bullshit. I mean, part of that is...
Official government policy.
Graham.
Part of broader outcomes is health and safety. It's a bloody legal requirement, right? The other part of that is training. Now, if we're going to have a sustainable sector, why is training seen as a broader outcome when it's an absolute necessity to doing business? I mean, if you don't get a warrant, if you've got a fleet of trucks, we've got the God Squad sitting on the side of the road, pull you up if you get so many bloody points against you, they take your fleet off the road. But there's nothing... But training is seen as a broader outcome. Broader outcome, you know, it's a nice to have. So other countries in the world have minimum percentages of people in training on government jobs. It's not hard. To some extent, we've got that in the tendering process, but then it's not followed up. There's actually no measure on it. So everybody in their tender has all these, how they're going to meet their broader outcomes, and then nobody checks whether they're doing it. So in a lot of cases, the system's there. We just need to follow them up. But I think we should simplify it. I think it would be pretty easy to say 10% of everybody working on government work has to be in a formal training agreement of some sort.
Alan, what do you think your members would say in response to that?
I don't think they'd have a problem with that. As I said, it's part of the incentivising where they put their investment dollars. So, yeah, at the moment, we have our own certification scheme, actually, Civil Trades. Rebecca runs that. It's not recognised at all by our clients and by our customers, and yet it proves the competency. Sure, you can have an academic qualification, but after their 4,000 hours, I think it is, Rebecca, it proves the competency on the job. That's a highly valuable certification, but features nowhere in the procurement process.
Okay, so we've got a massive problem with the disconnect. How do we overcome that? How do we connect training provision, education providers, government bodies and industry better? What can we do? Anyone? Well, jump in.
Yeah, I think firstly, training and education has to be seen as a critically important part of a business's strategy. And actually, I think also in the development of qualifications, industry has to have a significant input to make sure that what is being trained is actually appropriate for the needs of the business. And then it has to stay flexible because business needs change on a regular basis. Yep. So, if I look at what's happening in our space in WDCs, for example, with Waihanga Arau, we have an amazing partnership going where we're fully aligned on what the industry needs and wants and what we need to do to achieve those goals. So the more we can align ourselves, the better.
Yeah, I mean, it is about that being current. A lot of people are critical about the amount of time everyone spends connecting, and I think that's a weird thing, because actually we need to do more of the talking, more of the connecting, more of understanding the different perspectives from everyone in the sector. And I think that's, when we talk though about the value of the education, we were talking before about Germany. My family is all Austrian in Germany. The value of education, anything, is at a different level to here. I've got my master's in leadership development. I have the right over there to be Magister Richardson, right? I'd be called Master Richardson. You'd never call your doctor anything apart from Herr or Frau Doctor. Any qualification is valued, recognised and paid for, and therefore people take the time to really do it because they know their pay is, it's a respect thing. So I think, how can we absolutely, when people have invested so much time, let's value those skills, let's pay appropriately, but also let's put hooks on perhaps around CPD to make sure we keep our qualifications and our knowledge current, because our digital skills are required, right? So how do we keep people hooked in, I think, to ongoing lifelong learning rather than it's a one-stop, I'm done?
Yeah, look, I think there's obviously a part for the government, but governments come and governments go. And what was right under one government, well, if it's the right thing to do in your business, it's still the right thing to do under another government. Last year, Waihanga Row and the Construction Accord jointly held a summit in Wellington, a leadership summit, and we purposely invited a heap of businesses, mostly medium-sized businesses, that are all taking the lead themselves and investing in their people and showing leadership in their businesses. And like I said before, those are the businesses that were kicking goals then. The interesting thing is, when times get tough, if you've invested in your people and you've got competent people, confident people that are leaders in their own right, it makes that business more resilient. It makes that business more able to actually, I hate that word pivot, but they can actually take a different direction, they can follow the market, they can look for different opportunities. Try doing that with people that you've brought in maybe from overseas, or people that you hire on labour hire, or you've got your whole workforce is subcontracted out. So, we can ask the government to do this stuff for us, but ultimately, if you've got a business, the ball is in your own court. Yes, it's nice if the government helps us, but we can do a lot ourselves.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to go a little controversial now, because one of the recommendations from the report was a large campus that delivered civil infrastructure training, and we know in times of boom, on job is easy to do, and in times of bust, it seems to be that campus-based learning becomes more prevalent. So I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm going to start with Alan. But what are your thoughts around the idea of a dedicated civil training centre somewhere in Aotearoa, New Zealand?
I guess what I first say is that we already have organisations that have centres of excellence for through some of our private training enterprises, and maybe we're better off looking at whether or not we can scale those up rather than invest in a single entity. I would say, and Rebecca may hit me after this, but I mean, personally, I don't favour central campuses at all. I favour regional distribution of training centres of excellence, and a couple of reasons for that. One is that in all of our regions, our businesses have space and equipment available to utilise and train, so we're not having to reinvest in technology and buildings. Second is, though, I firmly believe in training within your community and not taking people away from the security of their families and their community friends and others while they're going through the training process. And to centralise it, to me, risks that possibility of taking them out of their comfort zone and interfering with the quality of the training they might get.
Nice.
What he said.
Love it. Graham, any thoughts?
Sorry, I'm not controversial on this one. I see the value.
Yeah.
And I've thought actually about it for the last week. I think people are learning differently now. And I understand that so many of our trades, there is so much hand-on element with heavy machinery and the like. But I think that we have to also use virtual learning better. I talk a lot about curiosity and courage with leaders. Because the skills you want and need to develop are out there. You just need to have the curiosity to want to and the courage to put up your hand to go and lean in. So that's my platform for our leaders. And I look at my kids, age 11 and 13. Anything they want to learn, they don't go on a course. They YouTube it or TikTok it. They're not actually allowed TikTok officially, just so you know. But they YouTube it. We're just been given a 3D printer. My first instinct, I went online to go to UB to find them a short course during the holidays. They don't want to do the short course in the holidays. They've just started watching the YouTube clips.
Yeah.
And I've given them a challenge, so by the end of the holidays, they will have created a gift for the guy who gave us the 3D printer. No course. So how can there be an assessment, therefore, to check their competence rather than them go through the learning? Where's the micro-qual? So I think people are learning differently, and I love the idea in one way of bringing people together centralised, but I think we lose more through that than we gain. And it's really costly, and there's no money, apart from the regional thing.
Good point.
So I'm going to disagree with both of you.
Yay!
Look, I don't disagree that I think we need. We can't have just a central campus. We need to service people in the regions. But I'm not sure that a country the size of New Zealand can sustain a seriously well set up campus for, and I would say rather than civil construction, heavy construction, which could encompass vertical as well as civil. And we've seen examples. I mean, this argument started when Shane Jones took a delegation over to
Melbourne.
Victoria, in the last government. But I've also I've employed people who've been through the British system, and they've got a number of campuses over there reflecting their population and what have you. Ultimately, we're all different. Employers are different. Trainees are different. Some people want to leave school and go to a block course for a couple of months to get some confidence and go off to work. Other people want to leave school and go to a polytech type campus situation for 12 months and then go off to work. Other people want to go straight to work and go to those campuses for upskilling. With ongoing technology and what have you, lifelong learning is more important than it's ever been, and I think opportunities to go to a really well set up campus has got to be invaluable. And I think for a country, what's our population now? 5 million, isn't it? We're the size of one city in Australia. I think there's an opportunity to do something really well. But what I would really like to think about is maybe not doing it in Auckland. Maybe we could take it out to a region where we may have a polytech that can't sustain itself, that we could bring a bunch of people in, accommodate them. It's not a new concept. When I left school, it was roughly 50 years ago, I went to Flock House as the first part of my farming training that I was doing at the time. Went there for a couple of weeks. There were when we were moving out after our 2-week stint, the year-long trainees were coming in. They had international people there, living there for 6 months or so, bringing in foreign dollars, So this isn't a new concept. It's not something that we would be dreaming up ourselves. But I think it's not a one-off. I think it's a combination of things.
So just thank you for your thoughts and opinions. I just want to jump in with a little bit of data. So that's around the number of people who are in the civil sector, but specifically around workforce leavers. So this comes from our Workforce Journey Indicator product. So the number of people engaged in the civil infrastructure sector in any given year is around about 47,204. The number of people that leave the sector each year is 10,157. So around about 21%. And then the third figure is those percentage of workforce, or the number of workforce leavers who have industry tenure of under 2 years, and that's 5,241. So it's roughly about 32% of the workforce are leaving in under 2 years. How do we stop that?
Leadership.
So how do we, it's great, how do we stop or halt the amount of turnover that we're getting in the civil infrastructure sector every year, every 2 years?
I think there's a couple of things for me there. So one is, we know we've got a mountain of work coming. Everyone talks about our $210 billion infrastructure deficit. and the current government calls themselves the government of infrastructure. So there's a huge amount of work coming along, and we know we're not going to have enough people to do the job. So we'll deliver our projects through domestic workforce, immigration and technology. So there's an incentive for businesses to keep their workforce engaged on that one. The second, though, is that, as I said before, it's got to be seen as a strategic part of your business and a strategic part of the procurement process. And until we get to that point, until we value training as much as we should, we are going to continue to lose people. And if you look at where we're losing people too, Australia has an extremely well-defined, well-funded and well-supported program of work that pales us into insignificance. It's easier for our workers who are well-trained to slot in to what's happening across Australia. I'll tell you, I was in a meeting actually with Simeon Brown, and there was a member of the Prime Minister's department there, and his answer to our workforce excess capacity at the moment was, why don't we just second our surplus capacity to Australia? And then at the point in time that we're ready to turn the tap on, they'll just come back. So, that kind of suggests to me that, again, he has no understanding of how critically and strategically important a well-qualified, well-trained workforce is to the delivery of their program. At the moment, we are losing people. As Graham said earlier, we'll get to the point where, when the tap gets turned on, we can't just upscale overnight. It's going to take time, and we won't be able to deliver on what our communities desperately need.
Yes, I see the pipeline issue, but I don't think that's why people are leaving. I think we have a culture problem. I think we have retention because people aren't feeling valued. They're not feeling valued, they're not feeling absolutely trained enough. But if women are 39% more likely than engineers turnover, we have a gender pay gap. Let's talk about flexible work, or should we not? Because there's the Waihanga Aroa, the great research about career perceptions. So what do our young people want? They want to feel valued, they want fair pay, and they want a work-life balance. Well, that's, to be fair, what we all want. Do they feel that they can receive that in infrastructure and construction? No. Right? So if you want those things, why would you then enter into this workforce? And then you've made the big step and you've come into the workforce, and then you don't feel valued or appreciated once you're there. Because, of course, like so many professions, we promote our best technical experts. And then you've got a foreman, or foreperson, or supervisor, who doesn't know how to train or to coach you, who doesn't understand how to look after your well-being, who doesn't give you feedback, because they've never received that themselves, and none of our education teaches them those skills. So then you're not getting the qualifications you need in the time you want, nor are you getting paid well enough, you're not feeling valued, so of course I'm going to go somewhere else. So how can we change the culture? What are the good stories around our sector that we can share so people want to join, and then when they're here, that they want to stay? And I think that's, if we can nut that out, we're part of the way there. And whilst I joke about leadership I think is part of the solution. And that is about training our leaders about how they can care and coach their people. And coaching absolutely in a construction site. I used to joke about the correctional facility guys, and that was mostly guys. I asked them, how do you coach? And they said, well, I don't call it coaching, but if someone asks me how to do something, I ask them if they've read the rule book. I said, that's coaching. You haven't given them the answer. And I said, what happens? Well, they come back and they tell me, and I then tell them if they're right or not. Awesome, okay? They didn't just say, here, this is what I do. We talked about that earlier. They questioned, and they helped people be curious to go and find out the answer themselves. How can we do more of those kind of things? So I think it is the culture and the leadership journey.
Thanks, Nicola.
I think there's another part of it. If we're going to, every time we talk about the sector, tell everybody what a court case it is, no wonder nobody wants to join it. There's issues in the sector. I've been in it 40 years. I know the issues as well as anybody else, but I'm really bloody proud of what we do. And actually we do a lot despite all those issues. And I know back in my scaffolding days, we had jobs where guys would take their wives out to the job on the weekend and say, hey, look at what we did, and I know their wives hated it. I know my wife hated it, but you know, it's a cool thing. I mean, there is so much that doesn't get stated about. There are still a lot of people like me that actually like going out and working physically. I don't bloody do it anymore, but you know, there are a lot of people we kind of look up to professional sports people and how they train their bodies and how they put their body on the line. But when it comes to tradespeople, society looks down their nose at them and will pay somebody way more to look at a computer screen all day and write on a piece of paper. So I think we can all do a hell of a lot more by building up what we're doing for society and in our jobs. And I mean, we're not just a digger driver or not just a scaffolder or not just a chippy or plasterer or whatever. We're a really important part in building our infrastructure and our housing and delivering the things that people need. And we, by and large, do a really bloody good job of it.
I'll add to that. I've brought together hundreds of major project leaders, and what shocked me most was that so many of them were not proud to say what they did at those family and friend barbecues. These were the men and women working for Health New Zealand and Waka Kotahi in education. They were building our infrastructure for our grandchildren, and they were not proud to say what they did because of all of the challenges. So I agree. How can we change this narrative? How can we share more of the good stories?
I think Graham makes a good point, actually. One of the things that's just blown me away coming in cold from outside the industry is just how much our contractors care about the communities they work in. You know, they're not just delivering projects, they're making a difference to their communities. And it's just mind-blowing. I mean, I live in the Hawke's Bay. We had cyclone come through. Who were the first responders in the cyclone? It was our guys out there with their diggers, helping save lives and protect property. It's extraordinary, and they did it for no reward, no compensation. They did it because they cared.
Yeah, it definitely is. I've got two more questions for the panel before we wrap up. And the first is, again, possibly a little controversial, but we talked a little bit earlier, and I shared the learnings from Germany, where industry invest, every business and industry invests 2.1% of their salary and wage into a shared training fund. Thoughts on that for New Zealand, on that type of model?
Start it tomorrow. I think it's a great idea. UK did it for a long time. You know, we don't have a problem investing in plant. You can borrow money to invest in plant. We have a real problem with investing in people. And the reason we don't want to invest in our people is because we're scared they're going to go. The interesting thing is if we don't invest in our people, they're going to go anyway. So, you know, there is a culture in New Zealand where there are a lot of companies, instead of investing in their people, they will poach and pay that extra dollar at the end of it. So that levy, if you like, on your wage bill certainly levels that playing field out. My understanding of how the system used to work in the UK was that everybody's levied, and then if you take on an apprentice or a trainee through a formal training agreement, you get a rebate. And to me, that's a pretty basic system that would work as well here as anywhere else.
Alan?
Personally, I don't agree on the levy system, but what I agree with is elevating the importance that training is given in an organisation's strategic plan, basically, and if they see it as important and if they see it adding value to the work that they're doing in the communities they're in, they'll invest accordingly.
Yeah, and I'm on the fence on it. Maybe more around the tax rebate. But I think, training is a strategic advantage, right? We need to do this to stay alive, right? We must invest in our people, and if we want our businesses to do better, so I'm probably more of the give companies freedom to choose how they do it, but have some expectations around it.
Great, thank you. And then the last one, which is a little self-reflective. So as systems practitioners, we like the art of self-reflection. So I'm going to ask the panel to share with me, and you, as leaders in the sector, what key areas of our own learning or skill development do we need to focus on to better address the challenges that we have in the civil construction space?
I guess for me, it's a recognition of two things. One is, again, the strategic importance of it. Secondly, though, it's a recognition that, in our case, there's a big difference between infrastructure and construction, and it's not well understood and well known. And I think we need to tell our story about infrastructure a lot better than we actually do.
Nice, thank you, Alan.
Can you just repeat the question?
So the question was, as leaders in the sector, what key areas of our own learning or skill development do we need to focus on to better address the challenges?
For me, it continues to be around digital and how we can incorporate the digital skills, and so much of what we imagine is already here. We just don't know about it. I mean, I love the fact that we talked before a bit about assessment. I was doing some research the other day on the smart wearables. Imagine if we'd had a smart wearable, glasses and a hat that tracked and gave us feedback on how we were doing something and could automatically assess us, right? There are things that are possible that I think the more we know about, the more we're open to doing things differently. I've recently gotten into farming, and the idea of when you know nothing about an industry, you're not constrained by how things have happened in the past. And I think so it's breaking down some of our old biases, thought processes, and looking at if anything was possible, how might we do this? That really puts the learner at the heart of it, really meets their needs, and just, we keep trying radical things and being brave.
Fantastic, thank you.
I actually struggle putting myself up there as a leader of the sector, to be quite honest. But I think what we need to do is take a longer term view. Partly because of the boom bust cycles I was talking about before, we tend to have a very short term view. Government has a 3 year view, which in the private sector you just cannot exist, because you have to plan further than that just to pay the debt off on your capital. But we need to take a much longer term view as a government, as a sector, and as businesses. So we need to be looking at investing back into our businesses, investing into the sector, and investing into infrastructure as a country.
Okay, well, we've reached our time, so we are going to wrap it up there. I'd like you to do a great big level 5 thank you for our panellists. Thank you very much.